Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is Solid Addy, and yet another review of a Metal Gear Solid game as part of our Metal Gear Solid Marathon. War has changed. Much like this review, I'm not a young man anymore. I'm Old Snake. Or should I say, Old Addy. Also, I'm not actually old, I just need to hydrate. That's better. So, it should be pretty obvious to anyone who's ever had any iota or inkling of interest in the Metal Gear Solid series that today, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are going to be reviewing Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. As some of you out there may know, I have been doing, as a quick recap, a Metal Gear Solid marathon of all the games, including the smaller scale releases like Portable Ops, Peace Walker, which was what we're about to play next. Many years ago, I played through Metal Gear Solid 5, both Ground Zeroes, and Phantom Pain. Also streamed Phantom Pain 5 or so years ago now, over on my Twitch channel. But I'm excited to get back to that one as well as part of this marathon, especially now that the story of that game and everything else in it is going to be recontextualized now that I've played through the first 4 major releases. Including Portable Ops, of course. And yeah, Metal Gear Solid 4 is a powerhouse of an entry. It's pretty much the culmination of years upon years of Kojima and his team crafting the ultimate conclusion to this story about the horrors of war. Of course, up until now, we've reviewed Metal Gear Solids 1, 2, 3, and Portable Ops here on the channel. All those games have led to this. Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. And the key thing about the Metal Gear Solid series, none of these major releases are in chronological order in the timeline. The release order may be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, obviously, but the chronological order is 3, 5, 1, 2, 4. So that's right, 4 is the ultimate conclusive game. This is the furthest the series goes in the Metal Gear canon, the Metal Gear timeline. There is one more game set after Metal Gear Solid 4, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, a dope-ass, badass hack-and-slash game, which I'm definitely going to be playing. It isn't considered canon, but whatever. In the words of Raiden, the main character of that game, and my favorite Metal Gear Solid character. Whatever. Metal Gear Solid 4. I just completed it not very long ago on stream tonight itself. Figured, you know what? Let me actually make the review video today itself while I still have all this age on me before I go wash it out so I don't have to put it on for a third time for this video. Or I'm not going to be streaming for 10 hours long or anything like that, playing the game. No use damaging my hair more than it's already been damaged. Not fun as someone with thinning hair. I had a ton of fun with this cosplay though. It's my first time ever dyeing my hair in any way, shape, or form, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Really happy we got to play through Metal Gear Solid 4 and that we've just been doing this marathon in general. But yes, this is the final game in the chronology. It's set in the year 2014. It came out in 2008, and as is to be expected, there are a lot of prophetic themes, messages, and meaning to this game that makes it remarkably impressive for its time. Much like Metal Gear Solid 2, which is the elephant in the room when it comes to that kind of thing. Metal Gear Solid 2 went into the dangers of information control, the rise of AI, the internet looking like a dangerous place in the future, how people would interact on it. And I loved it for all those reasons and more, especially once again, the ending, which is still stuck rent-free in my head. It left a lasting impression. That is still my favorite Metal Gear Solid game. That one set in 2009. Metal Gear Solid 3 is the ultimate prequel game. It goes back in time to the 60s. You play as the original Snake, Big Boss. And it's about the origins of how the world got to the state that it's in, that we see it in Metal Gear Solids 1, 2, and 4, where war is gradually changing. Less about ideology, more about numbers, statistics. Basically what we end up seeing it as in Metal Gear Solid 4, which I'll get into in a second. But all this begins when Big Boss, or at the time, Naked Snake, the OG Snake, takes down the original boss, his mentor, who sacrifices herself to, in a nutshell, prevent World War III from happening. She sacrifices her reputation. She goes down in history as a traitor. She does all of this as she dies to the hands of her disciple, who becomes the new Big Boss, as she tells him about what her vision for the world is, which is one in which soldiers are not controlled by the government, where they aren't puppets, where they're free to be the individuals they want to be. Big Boss ends up interpreting her will one way, while his Major Zero, ends up interpreting her will another. They both had their own interpretations of what she wanted, which to them involves this world without borders that the boss wanted, yes, but one where there is still a need for soldiers, where there is still a need for conflict and battlefields. They try to remake the world for soldiers, whereas in reality, the boss never wanted the world remade. Then there's eventually this ideological split between Zero and Snake. Snake is all about freedom. Zero is all about absolute control. The two men do form what's called the Patriots, but then eventually Zero's idea leads to the Patriots AI way down the line. Patriots AI outlives its creator Zero and ends up controlling pretty much every facet of society. Metal Gear Solid 2 deals with the control of information, what's curated to the populace. Metal Gear Solid 4 deals with the aspect of this AI called the SOP, the Sons of the Patriots, which deals with battlefield control and nanomachine control. So this game is set in 2014, 5 years after the events of MGS2. So from 3, we go from the 60s all the way to 2014, which is really cool. You start with a prequel game with 3 and Portable Ops, which is set a little bit after, all the way to Metal Gear Solid 4, which is 2014, the furthest we make it in the chronology. And in this game, we see the nightmarish end result of the Patriots AI and a world in which pretty much everybody has nanomachines. Soldiers have these bots in their bodies which control every facet of their being. Their emotions, their biological functions, all of it. And they even have weapons which are ID tagged. And what that means is the weapons will either work or they won't based on the biometric data they acquire from the nanomachines of the wielder. And all of this is governed by this incredibly sophisticated AI called, again, the Sons of the Patriots. And the terrifying thing about it is it gives rise to these PMCs, or private military companies, which basically wrest power from nations. So nations no longer wage war. They basically have no say. They have no power. There's no ideology left. It's basically just mercenaries fighting mercenaries in this endless cycle of war to perpetuate what's basically the war economy. So Solid Snake, our hero, Big Boss's son, is who you play as again in this game. So Metal Gear Solid 3 and Portable Ops, you don't play as him. Those are prequel games where you play as his father, Big Boss. But this one brings him back. He's old, he's gray. And my favorite thing is outsiders looking into the series going, well, that's the same guy from MGS3, right? Who was a rookie in the 60s. Now he's old. No, this is his son. Yeah, and it makes sense because, look, he's a clone of his father, okay? And he has accelerated aging. So between 2009 and 14, he ages like 30 to 40 years. And so that's why Old Snake is what he's known as in MGS4 and why he's all old and gray like this. You're actually playing as Solid / David / the son of Big Boss. Our hero, the face of the series, the protagonist who does all the heroic deeds that he does in the first game, the second one alongside Raiden, who you play as for the most part in MGS2, in order to make the world a better place. The character who fundamentally understands the boss's will the best without ever actually having met her. The character who wants to make the world a better place by ultimately keeping it the way that it is, by forging his own destiny, allowing others to live the way they want without altering any of that, just doing the best he can to make a better tomorrow. This is what the series is ultimately about. It's about how Big Boss misinterpreted the boss's will, which was actually that. And I love how this game is the pinnacle of that and how that just hammers that point home. So yeah, we're starting this review off pretty much just through the lens of the story, which is, in my opinion, the strongest point of the Metal Gear games. It's been such a joy, such a pleasure going through the games finally. I've known so much about these over the years, like I've said in the other reviews. I've read up bits and pieces on them here and there, watched videos, but it's one thing to do that and another thing to play them. And now I have, and now I pretty much fully understand what these games are all about. And it's wonderful. And I love the message in these games about how, despite how awful things can be, despite how awful things can get, you have the power to do the right thing. And this one takes it a step further by showing how you can't radically change the world. The best you can do is leave the world as it is. If you try to remake everything, that's only ever going to backfire. And we see the hellscape that is the result of that in Metal Gear Solid 4. So Solid Snake is thrust into the battlefield, and that's basically the gameplay loop in Metal Gear Solid 4. This is a game that is very, very cutscene heavy. There are a lot of cinematics. It's garnered a reputation for being pretty much a movie game to a great degree, but in the snippets of gameplay that there are, you're thrust into these battlefields in a 5-act structure game Some of them take place on battlefields for the most part. And you basically crawl, stealth, snake your way through these absolute hellhole war zones where PMCs are fighting rebel factions. You crawl under their gunfire, you take out some of these combatants yourself, and you pick up their guns. You can sell them on the black market to this interesting character named Drebin, who provides Snake with all of his arms that he's able to use, despite things being ID tagged. And honestly, I love that. They're Metal Gears left and right. You know, they aren't just these huge, hulking, nuclear kaijus at this point. They're also these tinier, 10-foot tall, bipedal bots that walk through the streets causing mayhem. So Snake is just in the hell of it from the very get-go of this game. He's old as crap, and in one final rodeo, he's been sent to hunt down Ocelot, who is in every single Metal Gear Solid game and is the most intriguing character. I would argue Metal Gear Solid is this story of Ocelot through the perspective of the snakes that you play as throughout the games and the different timelines. And in this one, Ocelot is also old as crap. This is Metal Gear Solid geriatric representation, all right? And it's wonderful. Ocelot is referred to as Liquid in this game, since Ocelot, before the events of Metal Gear Solid 2, acquired the arm of Solid Snake's brother, Liquid Snake, who he defeated in that game and who died of a virus called the Foxdie virus. He acquires his arm. He starts to think that he's him as a result. And in this game, he goes through further hypnotherapy and drugs and all this crazy Kojima mumbo jumbo that makes him fully adopt the persona of Liquid. So even though you're physically hunting down Ocelot, he's got the personality of Liquid Snake. And I'll get a little bit spoilery here because I really do like this game and I love talking about the story. It's so well done. The reason Ocelot is adopting this persona of Liquid is because in reality, he's trying to take down the Patriots AI system himself. Everyone thinks he's trying to seize control for himself, but he's trying to take it down. And the Patriots AI gets confused. It's like, okay, wait, Liquid, that's an enemy. He's supposed to be dead. So it's susceptible, it's vulnerable to Ocelot trying to get in there and do his thing with a Trojan virus that allows it to finally be taken down. So in a way, even though he manipulates everybody, which is his thing throughout the games, he ultimately does the right thing. But the reason he does it is because of his loyalty to Big Boss, which is where his loyalty is finally revealed to be in this game. Because throughout the games, you're always wondering, okay, who is Ocelot truly working for? Because he's this quintuple, septuple agent who you can never truly understand the real motives of. But this game confirms that all along, he respected Big Boss as a comrade, as a friend. And he's working to shut down the Patriots AI system to save him from captivity, essentially, from the Patriots, who needed his body, needed his DNA to run the system. And Solid is ultimately the key. He's manipulated by Ocelot to go after him as part of this grand plan to make everything work out the way that it does. And I loved it. It's such an explosive, action-packed game while still maintaining that stealth core. Again, I loved being able to stealth around under the cover of gunfire, slowly, stealthily taking out a lot of the troops on both sides as I made my way towards the objectives in this game. Each act is set in a different part of the world, so it starts off in the Middle East. That's where Solid Snake's hunt begins. And it goes to South America, and again, I have to talk about spoilers in this. Act 4 of the game, it takes you back to frickin' Shadow Moses from Metal Gear Solid 1. And this is a nice place to segue into talking about how this game is the ultimate Metal Gear Solid fan service game. This is something I heard about it going into it, that it has this reputation of being very fan servicey, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. To be honest with you, hearing that it was a movie game and a fan servicey game made me go in with tempered expectations, not low expectations. I knew it would still be great, but tempered. I ended up loving this game way more than I thought I would. I know it's considered more a contentious Metal Gear Solid game because the cutscene to gameplay ratio is way too high. I mean, this game has the world record for the longest cutscene of all time with the final one. But I never felt that. The gameplay stood out. It was solid. I love the crazy arsenal of weapons that Solid got to use in these missions. And again, the loop of picking up weapons you already had off of bodies and then them just automatically getting sold in the black market, getting money from that, and then using that money to procure more weapons, items, ammo, all that kind of stuff from Drebin's shop, the black market dealer, who, by the way, that character is incredible as well. So full of personality, and this adorable little, I'd assume, nanomachined monkey in diapers who drinks cola all the time. But I digress. The gameplay was awesome, and it was amazing to play as Solid Snake again. It felt like it had been forever, which in a way it had, because really the only other game where you play as him from start to finish is Metal Gear Solid 1. In 2, you only play the prologue as Solid and the rest of it as Raiden. And as cool as Raiden is, he's my favorite character, of course, in Metal Gear Solid, he's still no Solid, right? He's still no Solid Snake, he's still no David, and this game brings David back one last time as a clone who's been through accelerated aging, who's on the verge of lying down on his deathbed for one final mission to save the world one last time. So yeah, I didn't mind all the stuff that this game has garnered a reputation for. The cutscenes, even though they were really long, never felt like they had minutes passing by. It all went so fast because all of it was just directed wonderfully. All of it was so exuberant. And if you never knew, there are moments in this game where if you never knew that Kojima wanted to be a film director, you would be able to tell very clearly, crystal clearly, through how brilliantly directed every cutscene in this game is. Between the slower, conversational, yet meaningful moments and the crunchy, action-packed set pieces, some of which even intersperse themselves through gameplay. Like there's a really cool segment in the Shadow Moses chapter where there's a split screen format. So one half of the screen is you playing as Snake, of course, mowing down a bunch of Metal Gear geckos. And I love that they're called geckos because I hate lizards. And the other side of the screen is Raiden, my boy, and he's so cool in this game. He's unbelievably awesome, and I love seeing him again fighting off Vamp, a villain who returns from Metal Gear Solid 2. And even in the moments that are pure cinematics, there's still a really cool little feature to keep the player engaged, which is to smash the X button. You can keep smashing this X button whenever the prompt shows up, or I guess A button on my Xbox controller, to play these flashback sequences. Because yeah, like I said, Metal Gear Solid 4 is pretty much this very fan servicey game, and what I mean by that, and what people I'd imagine meant by that before I play this and would read that, is there's a lot of quote-unquote nostalgia bait. This game brings back a ton of characters from the previous Metal Gears, which I thought was amazing. I actually really liked that a lot, because the way they were brought back makes sense, and it was really cool to see a lot of these characters who you only really perceived through the perspective of the codec calls in Metal Gear Solid 1, you know, with the green screen and their portraits and Snake talking to them all in the AO. You know, it was really cool seeing them being fully realized in 3D and beautiful 2008 graphics, which that's another thing. The visuals, just like in any other Kojima game, are incredible for their time, and this game looks phenomenal for a 2008 game. It was cool seeing characters like Meryl, Mei Ling, Colonel Campbell, all these characters you would, for the most part, really just seen through codec calls in Metal Gear Solid 1, again, for the most part, brought to life here in this game the way that they were, and the emphasis they were given as well. There were a lot of full circle moments that wrapped up a lot of storylines set up for these characters in the previous games, and some really cool dynamics, and unexpected ones at that, set up between Solid Snake / David and these characters who he's known in the past, his crew, his people, his homies, who help him on this mission. For example, again, with Raiden, I loved how in Metal Gear Solid 2, Raiden is a rookie. You play as him being fresh out of VR training, and he's in way over his head with the mission he's going through, and he doesn't know what the heck he's doing, what he's up against, and he's a very trepidatious soldier. And throughout it all, Solid Snake is this legend he looks up to who assists him in the field. He gives him advice, he gives him tips, he gives him these really poignant life lessons. Hell, the game ends with him giving Raiden a really meaningful lesson about the importance of destiny and choosing your own path in life and ignoring all this AI bullshit. But in this game, it's so interesting. All these characters haven't aged a lot, really. It's only been 5 years, but Solid Snake, the poor guy's aged 30 to 40 years. He appears to be in his late 70s, early 80s at the very least. And a lot of the characters who he was mentoring in the past, they now mentor him. Raiden imparts all this knowledge to him, and he comes across as this more enigmatic, legendary figure, especially with how he's introduced into the story. It's wonderful. I love how the tables were turned in terms of the dynamic between Snake and his comrades in this one. It made for some really interesting scenarios. Snake and, you know, his best bro, Otacon, was another one of my favorite examples of that. And Otacon in this game, he gets the craziest glow up ever that you're not expecting. He goes from nerd to cool nerd in this. And I love that. I loved his arc, his story. I loved all the characters. It was such a cool all-stars Metal Gear type game, if that makes sense. Everything came full circle for the characters. A lot of the plot lines were wrapped up very nicely. And there were some really beautiful, nostalgic throwbacks for fans that I can't even imagine going through this game and not having a smile on your face while going through them. Again, to bring it all back, I went on a crazy tangent. Shadow Moses in Act 4 of the game. That is where Metal Gear Solid 1 is set. Shadow Moses Island near Alaska. And there's such a cool segment where Snake is headed down there in his chopper, and he has this dream sequence of infiltrating Shadow Moses, but you get to play it. You as a player get to control this dream sequence and Solid Snake in it, but through the perspective of the original PS1 game. You're playing as young David approaching Shadow Moses the exact way you did. And after that, he wakes up and you're put in there and it plays music from the first game that just sends the craziest of goosebumps and chills across your entire body. Because you're like, wow, okay, we're back. We are so back. Getting to see Shadow Moses in 3D in 2008 graphics with Metal Gear Solid 4 is just such a magical moment. The same areas you infiltrated, the same areas you went through, it's all run down, decrepit, all replaced by these cold, soulless machines that patrol the place. And you see all these vestiges of the past and all the stuff that you worked through while the music plays, and you pick up these new songs for your iPod. That's another thing. Snake can listen to an iPod through this game, like in MGS5's iDroid. You go through it, you pick up nostalgic tracks, and the iPod Shuffle, that's what it is. UI is amazing, songs on it are great. You listen to this as you go through it, picking up songs from MGS1. It's just such a beautiful moment. Absolutely top 10 moments in gaming for me. Shit, I only started my Metal Gear Solid marathon, a month ago? And when I went through Shadow Moses tonight, I did this tonight, by the way, so this is still fresh in my mind, and I'm still really hyped over all of this stuff. I felt like I was visiting a long lost friend that I had met like 15 years ago. It feels like 15 years ago that I played Metal Gear Solid 1, going through it again in this, because this game really makes you feel aged, much like Solid/Old Snake. You feel his fatigue, you feel his tiredness, how he just wants all of it to be done. He's tired of war being this never-ending, horrific machine, which is now literally being run by machines. War is nothing more than an ugly commodity now in the world that is portrayed by Metal Gear Solid 4. But what makes Snake such an incredible character at the end of the day, Solid Snake, is the fact that regardless of his hardships in life, regardless of being an inferior clone as part of the experiments that created him from his father, despite living 30 to 40 odd years only, despite dying of a virus that's going to kill him in 3 months in this game, because that's a plot line in it as well. And of course, lung cancer on top of all of it, because you can't have Snake without his cigarettes, which he smokes like a fiend in this one. And then losing comrades, having to fight for as long as he can remember, having to presumably kill his father, Big Boss, in one of his earliest missions. Despite everything that he has gone through, he still chooses to do the right thing. And he still chooses to try and make a better tomorrow. And that is relayed more beautifully than it ever has been in the series in this game. I enjoyed every second of Metal Gear Solid 4. Again, even when watching the cutscenes, I forgot to mention this earlier, but there's some really wholesome moments in the cutscenes as well between each act, called these mission briefing interludes, where you're in your aircraft, that's your home base, and the characters are hanging out, debriefing, talking about what they've learned up until that point, what their next destination is going to be. And even in these scenes, there's still some interactivity for the player. Yes, outside of spamming X to see the flashbacks. You can control his really wholesome, cute, small Metal Gear, which is referred to as Otacon because it's basically him wheeling it around and piloting it around. It's a tiny Metal Gear which has a camera of his face, which he uses to FaceTime Snake in the AO. There's a ton of fun to be had for the player. And on top of being able to witness some really amazing, compelling, interesting story stuff, you have to, fool around and have a little bit of fun as well on the side, which is what's always been really nice about Kojima's games. There's a really nice blend of goofiness, quirkiness, and also seriousness, darkness, maturity. There's this really nice blend there. And again, is one of the things that this game gets across amazingly well. And, on the topic of signature Kojima stuff, this is definitely also one of his horniest Metal Gear Solid games. If you thought Metal Gear Solid 3 was horny, prepare for a shot of some cake / butt / whatever you want to call it, pretty much once every half an hour in this game. And that's a good place to segue into the bosses. You fight a bunch of smoking yet horribly troubled and sadly traumatized babes in this game as the bosses. And to be real with you, the bosses weren't the highlight of this experience for me. I would say Metal Gear Solid 2 had the most memorable bosses. 3 had the best boss fight at the end in the form of Naked Snake versus the original boss, or Big Boss versus the OG boss. But 2, I would say, had the best selection. It was the most fun I had fighting bosses, especially with... Man, I could just hear the boss theme playing in my head right now from MGS2, especially with that music playing in the background. That's just my favorite MGS game as a whole. This game, it felt very samey fighting the bosses. They're basically these replicas of the rogue Fox unit that Snake fought in the first Metal Gear Solid. So even in the boss fights in this game, there are these nostalgic callbacks to the original variants of these bosses. There was one really cool one in the form of Sniper Wolf from Metal Gear Solid 1, which was also my favorite boss fight in that game. Sniper Wolf was an amazing character, and her story was great, the way it was told after you defeat her on all of that. There's a fight a lot like that in this, which happens in the exact same place too when you go back to Shadow Moses, and that was a whole lot of fun. All these bosses basically represent Liquid Ocelot's PMCs, and when you defeat them, you get at least 15 butt shots, 15 camel toe shots, in addition to Drebin codecking you about their backstories, which that specifically, finding out their lore, I feel could have been done a little bit better. And yeah, the fights themselves were okay. They were cool. Basically, all the bosses in this game boiled down to being bullet sponges. You would pretty much shoot him down for the most part, and that would kind of be it. Every now and again, occasionally, you would have something like, hey, stab this syringe into this boss here to get rid of the nanomachines in their body, suppress them, and then take them out. But for the most part, it really just boiled down to, okay, whip out a gun, something like an LMG, and just mow them down and get rid of that health bar. The other games had a lot more variance with how you had to take them down. They all felt like puzzles. I think Metal Gear Solid 1 honestly takes the cake in terms of this. It was really fun figuring out what made these bosses tick, the best strategies, solutions to the problems they posed, having to call your teammates on the codec to get them to assist you with taking them down with the hints and what have you. That was all amazing. And that's another thing. In this game, I felt like I never once really wanted to use the codec. Metal Gear Solids 1 and 2 specifically, I had so much fun just going out of my way to want to phone up the characters, talk to them, even if it was just to get a couple of goofy little lines between them. In this game, I didn't really care, but that could have also just been because I was so immersed in the actual moment-to-moment gameplay. It was really fun. There was so much stuff there, there's so much stuff going on, and I mean, another thing that was really cool about the gameplay, this one added the ability to move around while being crouched, finally. Up until now, I found it really awkward, only being able to snake around while prone, crawl around while prone. This one actually lets you move around while crouched. So that was sick. This game has all the bells and whistles from the previous ones, but it's the sleekest that the stealth design has been up until this point with Metal Gear Solid. Obviously, 5 will forever and always take the cake, right? I think that's pretty obvious as the ultimate Metal Gear Solid game in terms of the mechanics and gameplay. But for its time and for the point that I'm at in this marathon, Metal Gear Solid 4 is basically the culmination of all the gameplay mechanics up until now, with the exception of Portable Ops, I would say, because Portable Ops is its own kind of offshoot game that is more in line with the stuff that they would start setting up for games that came after it, like Peace Walker, which is another offshoot game. Still important releases, but more offshoots about Big Boss, and then Metal Gear Solid 5. So Metal Gear Solid 5 is kind of a convergence of the gameplay concepts. You have the concepts introduced in Portable Ops that make their way there, and all the core concepts from the numbered games over time making their way over to 5 as well. So yeah, 5 is the ultimate, end state, pinnacle of Metal Gear mechanics. And 4 takes some really cool strides to get there, for sure. And also has some really unique things I want to say are not in any of the other Metal Gear games as well, like Snake having something called the Octo Camo, which basically makes it so that if he's prone in a certain area for long enough, the entirety of his camo on his sneaking suit will take on the form of the material that he's on to improve the percentage of his invisibility or concealment. And as you start moving around, that number goes down a little bit, but when you stay still again, he really blends in Again, he may even take on the form of the material he's on, and that number goes back up. I thought that was a brilliant concept. There's even a portion of the game where you unlock a face octo camo, which was really, really neat. One of them allowed you to take on the appearance of young Snake again, so it was really cool to see young Snake in the Metal Gear Solid 4 engine in 2008 graphics, what he would have looked like. There's also a really cool one that allows you to take on the form of Snake in MGS1 graphics, so young Snake with a PS1 polygon face. It's great. This game, again, was just Kojima at his finest when it comes to his characteristic of giving these nostalgic treats to players, some that even border on breaking the fourth wall, some that are on the nose, some that even just end up breaking the fourth wall. It's wonderful. So many beautiful callbacks, so many amazing things here and there like that. And yeah, the end of this game, we just rolled the credits not long ago. I talked about it for a little while. I had so much to say about it live. And as usual, you guys can check out my VODs of the full playthrough. They're up on the second YouTube channel. I stream these on Twitch. So if you want to see my raw live thoughts after I beat the game, they're there. We had a really fun discussion about Metal Gear Solid 4, what I thought of it, why I think it's such a special game, why I enjoyed it way more than I thought I would. But the entirety of that final cutscene, despite it being over, what, an hour long, close to an hour and a half, I don't know, again, world record for longest cutscene ever, it didn't feel like any time went by. I was having such a blast seeing how they were wrapping everything up, the story of Solid Snake, Big Boss, the entirety of the supporting cast up until that point, pretty much. This is how you conclude a game right here. This is how you respectfully tie up a game series, a saga, something that's near and dear to a lot of people, in the most effective way imaginable. The series ends without me going into specific spoilers, because I have already spoiled a couple things here and there. Has been a spoiler discussion for the most part, but I still will avoid talking about very specific things that happen. The broad stroke at the end of it is Big Boss ultimately realizes what the boss's will was. And the final shot of the game is one that will just stick with you. The music in the credits, the fact it plays Nicola and Bart, which is the opening song to Ground Zeroes, which I loved. I didn't realize it had a different version, which was played in the credits of the fourth game. It was such a cool surprise for me as a big MGS5 fan. And a lot of what's there, I will say, if you're going to play this game and you haven't, is presented in the form of a post-credit scene. So retrospectively, like as you may know, I love Death Stranding 1 and 2, my third favorite game. They take up the same spot. The first Death Stranding has a fake out moment with the first set of credits, and then a bunch of really important story stuff happens afterwards. Metal Gear Solid 4, I want to say, was the birth of Kojima doing that. There's a long credit sequence, not very long, but there's a credit sequence that gets you to the bottom of it. And when you get to the bottom of it and it shows you the last credit and it segues into that post-credit scene, one of the coolest moments in gaming history. I've never had a credit sequence set up a really pivotal story sequence before in anything I've experienced, with a credit, with a certain character's name and the actor that's playing them, just for that specific scene at the very end. It's phenomenal, and I loved that. All this is to say, the first set of credits, don't turn your game off. The game won't let you skip them, but don't turn it off, all right? I would no shit put Metal Gear Solid 4 within, so far, my top 3 Metal Gear Solid games. 2 is still my favorite. I want to say 1 comes right after 2. The gameplay was tough for me. It's an older game. There's still a lot of 90s jank in there, like I was talking about in my review of MGS1. But the level design, I mean, shit, even MGS4 here. Fantastic level design. But 1 started it all for its time. Incredible level design. Still holds up really well. The boss fights, the music, the story, especially the story, what it represented, the beauty of underdogs, that's what it ultimately represented to me. I love a good story about the underdog trope and how Solid Snake is that. I loved it for it. It's my second favorite. If it weren't for all of that, all those bits and pieces, I would probably put Metal Gear Solid 4 in my number 2 spot. But I think the way I want to rank them is 2, 1, and then 4. 2 just had the best of what 1 and 4 had to offer. It was the best of both worlds. It was the perfect marriage. Excellent, phenomenal gameplay, bosses, and then peak cutscenes to boot. The game starting with the Manhattan tanker, all the stuff that happens there, the big shell portion after that, that whole act, and all the story stuff, the revelations, everything with GW, the AI, Arsenal gear, all of that stuff with Metal Gear Solid 2, and then Raiden, once again, being the absolute epitome of what I perceived with Solid Snake in Metal Gear Solid 1, being this underdog character, his whole character representing how you don't have to be somebody special to be like Solid Snake, this legend we established in the first game who already was an underdog himself. That resonated so deeply. And then Snake's speech at the end of it. So these are my top 3 Metal Gear Solid games. After that, I would probably say 5 because I have to put my first Metal Gear Solid game up there somewhere. It's still got the best gameplay. But now that I've played a bunch of these, does it have the best story? Not by a long shot. It has a great story. Again, this is all relative. These are the Metal Gear games relative to one another. They're all masterpieces, but relative to one another. 5, the story, not really. It's outside the top 3. I would say after 5, Portable Ops, and then Peace Walker. Again, these are all masterpieces. 3 comes last simply because it's the one whose gameplay I jived with the least. There were some really cool ideas, but there were more than a couple spots where I had some pet peeves for the reasons I talked about in my MGS3 review, which you can check out here on the channel. But as usual, the story was great. The characters were amazing. And 3 has the best boss fight out of any of the Metal Gear Solid games, hands down. It's the best final boss fight out of any of the games. But MGS4 is up there too. It's pretty close. I would say second best final boss fight. I'll spoil it. The final confrontation between Solid Snake and Liquid Ocelot. How they're at the top of Outer Haven, the ultimate destination, the ultimate endpoint, end goal, where the Patriots AI is situated, where Solid takes it down. It's the classic Kojima fist fight boss fight, which this game introduced. This is the reason it's a classic, but if you're like me and had only really played Death Stranding before, you'll recognize it in those ones as well, with the ending of the first Death Stranding, or portion close to the ending, and the ending of the second one. Classic fist fights that are there as a result of the scene at the end of Metal Gear Solid 4 between Snake and Ocelot, slugging it out, going through different phases of the fight. The health bars morphing as you fight to represent the different games and their music. And the music would change too from the different games. It was legendary. The direction in this game was out of this world. I think that if you look at Metal Gear Solid 4 more as this entertainment piece as opposed to purely a video game or purely a movie, just something that's a fun ride, a fun thrill ride, it is so much fun. And that's how I approached the whole thing. And I didn't even approach it that way consciously. It just felt that way to me. And I loved it, you guys. This is I would say a 9 out of 10, right? If we're being real, the boss fights, again, I think kind of pull the experience down a little bit for me. But besides those, I loved everything about this game. And again, way more than I thought I would. Again, this game ends on such a powerful, important message, so conclusively, beautifully wraps up the whole series together about how war cannot get any uglier, right? It cannot get any uglier if man, essentially the way I see it, tries to play God. If you try to radically recreate systems, if you try to radically change up the nature of things, it will only ever backfire. And the best you could do as an individual is what you can do as an individual. Just focus on living your life the best you can live your life. And respect the will of others, as they say in the game. Respect how others choose to live their lives and respect their wishes for themselves. You can only ultimately control your own self, your own destiny that you pave for yourself. And that's how you go about leaving behind a legacy. I love it, man. As someone who is deeply enraptured by Death Stranding for its messages about connection and the importance of unity, I'm so happy to have played these games and uncovered such a similar humanitarian message through Metal Gear Solid. And that's what I love about Kojima's games at the end of the day. I can't wait to play Peace Walker next. Another small scale release, another PSP title like Portable Ops. And that one should be fun. I'll probably tag some friends along for those ones, or that one, since I know it's multiplayer. I've come to know it's multiplayer. And the Metal Gear Solid 5, in addition to the original 2 Metal Gears 1 and 2, at the end of it all, I think it's going to be really awesome going back to my first game that I ever played that was my introduction to the series, as well as Metal Gear 1 and 2, which very closely tie in to Metal Gear Solid 5 in a really cool way. So that's going to be beautiful. I can't wait for that. And if you're wondering how I played Metal Gear Solid 4, because yes, it is in PS3 jail, sadly, I really hope that Master Collection Volume 2 announcement rolls around pretty soon. It's a given. It's got to be in that, right? There's definitely going to be Metal Gear Solid 4 is part of the second Master Collection that Konami puts out, which, these collections aim to port all these older Metal Gear Solid games onto all the platforms we have today. Fingers crossed that announcement isn't too far away and that Metal Gear Solid 4 is going to be in that collection. I play this through emulation. The only way to play right now is via an original PS3 or RPCS3. It's been known to be a very spotty game on RPCS3, which is the PS3 emulator, but it's come a long way. We did admittedly run into a couple of texture bugs, a couple of crashes, especially on the first stream we did of the game. But if you have at least a 1080, as far as I know, you shouldn't have any issues. It should be a pretty smooth sailing experience, and there are plenty of guides on how to set this game up. Any issue you run into, take it from me, any issue that may seem like you're the only one going through it, I can guarantee you, others have gone through at least once. There's at least one Reddit thread for every issue you can run into with this game through emulation. So the best you can do, follow one guide, look up Metal Gear Solid 4 on the RPCS3 wiki, look through what it recommends, how to run this game, the best settings to use, look up a guide on YouTube that's a good reputable one, and then go in with the expectation that you might still need to tinker some things and adjust on the fly. Run into whatever issues you run into, and then look up a Reddit thread on what that issue is. Chances are, this is the case for me. You will find a comment in the replies that has the fix for you. People have been incredibly helpful when it comes to emulating this game over the years, and that made my experience of going through it so much less hectic than it could have been. And I'm glad we ultimately got through it. So until the next review, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's been real. I've been Old Addy. I've been Old Addy as Old Snake. In a war that's changed. Sorry, again, I'm not actually old. I was just dehydrated there. Until the next one, ladies and gents, keep on staying beautiful and keep on keeping on.